There is a persistent structural myth that keeps brilliant strategists, operations leads, and creative directors from stepping into the highest leverage roles in the economy. It is the belief that the only way to enter the technology sector or to claim a seat at the product table is to speak the language of syntax. We look at the codebase like a glass wall. We see the movement behind it, the scale, the equity, the reshaping of modern life. But we assume that because we cannot write the script, we cannot direct the play. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of what technology actually is in 2026. Tech is not just code. Tech is logic. And if you have navigated complex organizational politics or managed a household budget during a recession, you are already running advanced algorithms. You just haven't learned to label them yet. Today, we are mapping the tech pivot, but we are not talking about boot camps, and we are certainly not talking about learning to code in your spare time while managing a full workload and a family. That is an efficiency trap. Instead, we are looking at the role of the architect versus the bricklayer. The industry is flooded with people who can lay bricks, who can write clean, functional code. What the industry is starving for, and what it pays a premium for, is the person who understands why the building exists, how the people will move through it, and whether the foundation can hold the weight of the business model. This is where we find the hybrid professional. This is where your existing expertise in human behavior, operations, and finance gains a force multiplier. We are going to audit your logic, not your syntax. Before we begin the audit, I want to invite you to think about who is holding the map with you. PathFindHer isn't just a broadcast. It is a collective of women who are tired of the binary choice between burning out and opting out. We are building a library of strategies for the navigational layer of your career. If you are looking for peer navigation, intelligent, low-ego, high-strategy discourse without the hustle culture, consider joining us. We are simply trying to find the path that allows for ambition and sanity to coexist. Now, let's look at the terrain of the so-called technical role. Let us examine the terrain of the technical label. In most organizations, there is a hard border. On one side, you have the business, sales, marketing, operations, HR. On the other side, you have product and engineering. This border is patrolled by jargon. If you don't know what an API is, or the difference between front-end and back-end, you are politely escorted back to the business side. The structural friction here is that this separation is artificial. It implies that business logic and technical logic are different species. They are not. They are mirrors. The business requirement is the what and why, and the technical requirement is the how. When we accept the myth that we are non-technical, we voluntarily hand over our agency. We allow decisions to be made in a black box, and we only see the output when it is too late to change the trajectory. This exclusion is often framed as a lack of skill on our part, but it is actually a failure of translation within the system. If we look at the compass, the data, and the trajectory of the market, we see a massive correction coming. As AI becomes more capable of generating code, the value of pure syntax generation is compressing. The ability to write a function in Python is becoming a commodity. However, the ability to discern which function is needed and how that function impacts the user experience and the bottom line is increasing in value. Research into the workforce of 2026 highlights the rise of translational competence. This is the ability to span the gap between domain expertise and technical execution. The compass tells us that the future doesn't belong to the person who can type the fastest. It belongs to the person with the clearest mental model of the system. We need to stop viewing technical as a vertical skill set and start viewing it as a horizontal layer of logic that runs through every department. Imagine a typical scenario. You are in a high-stakes roadmap meeting. The head of engineering says that a requested feature, let's say a customized dashboard for your biggest client, is not technically feasible in the current sprint due to back-end debt. The room goes silent. The non-technical leaders nod, intimidated by the terminology. They retreat. They accept a subpar solution because they cannot challenge the premise. This is the landmark of the coding myth in action. It's a loss of power. Now, reimagine that scenario. You don't know how to code the dashboard, but you understand the logic of the database. You ask, is the friction in the data retrieval or the display layer? You ask, if we bypass the custom filter, can we ship the raw data export as a stopgap? Suddenly, the conversation shifts. You aren't coding, but you are engineering the solution. You have crossed the border. You have signaled that you understand the system's constraints, and you are negotiating trade-offs rather than accepting roadblocks. That is the moment the glass wall shatters. So what is the path through this terrain? It begins with a refusal to self-reject. We must stop saying, "I'm not technical." Instead, use the phrase, "I am functional, not syntactic." Your first step is to demystify the black box. You do not need a computer science degree. You need to understand the architecture of your specific business. Start by interviewing a friendly engineer. Ask them to draw the system for you. Where does the data enter? Where does it live? What triggers it to move? Treat it like a supply chain map. If you work in logistics, you know how goods move from a warehouse to a truck. Software is the same. It is just data moving from a server to a screen. Once you visualize the movement, the jargon becomes just labeling. The path requires you to be curious about the plumbing, not just the water. This is how you reclaim your seat at the decision-making table. Let's move deeper into the map, to the concept of translational competence. The terrain here is often filled with expensive misunderstandings. In many organizations, the business speaks in terms of revenue, retention, and quarterly goals. Engineering speaks in terms of stability, scalability, and technical debt. These two groups are often optimizing for different variables. The friction arises when these variables collide. A marketing campaign promises a feature that engineering hasn't built. Engineering builds a robust tool that no customer actually wants. This misalignment is the cost of the translation gap. It is a massive inefficiency that bleeds capital and burns out teams. The organization doesn't need more people shouting their own language louder. It needs interpreters. It needs hybrid professionals who can stand in the middle and say, when marketing says urgency, they mean Q3 revenue targets. When engineering says risk, they mean server downtime. Here is the trade-off we need to make. The compass points toward the hybrid professional as the cornerstone of the 2026 org chart. We are moving away from hyper-specialized silos toward networked roles. The data shows that individuals who possess double STEM skills, for example, marketing plus data analysis or HR plus systems architecture, command a significant wage premium. This brings us to the red thread of money and leverage. Translational competence is a high-leverage activity. If you can save a team from building the wrong product for 6 months, you have saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. That value is far higher than simply executing a task efficiently. By positioning yourself as the translator, you detach your value from hours worked and attach it to strategic impact. You become the bridge that the organization cannot afford to burn. Let's visualize this landmark. Consider a project manager. Let's call her Elena. She manages the launch of a new internal tool. The developers are stuck. They are arguing about which framework to use, striving for technical perfection. The stakeholders are furious about the delay. A traditional manager might just crack the whip, demanding overtime to meet the deadline. That is the hustle trap. Elena, operating as a hybrid professional, calls a pause. She goes to the whiteboard. She draws the business objective. We need to reduce processing time by 20%. She turns to the engineers. Does Framework A or Framework B get us to 20% faster, even if the code isn't beautiful? She translates the business constraint into a technical constraint. She creates a shared reality. The engineers realize they don't need perfection, they need velocity. The stakeholders realize that to get velocity, they might have to sacrifice a secondary feature. Elena has translated the needs, de-escalated the conflict, and unblocked the flow. She didn't write a line of code, but she was the most technical person in the room because she understood the system's objective. To walk this path, you must start building your personal dictionary. Pick 3 technical terms that are thrown around in your organization. Maybe it's API, latency, or refactoring, and learn them deeply. Not the dictionary definition, but the business implication. What does refactoring actually cost in terms of time? Why is it necessary for long-term speed? Once you understand the implication, start using the language in your specific domain. If you are in HR, talk about the scalability of your onboarding process. If you are in finance, talk about the technical debt of your manual spreadsheets. By adopting the syntax of the dominant power structure, which is tech, you signal that you are a peer. You signal that you are ready for the pivot. This is not about pretending. It is about expanding your interface surface area. You are making yourself compatible with the future of the company. We often discuss upskilling as a defensive measure to keep our jobs, but I want to pivot the lens to offense. Why do we want to pivot into tech or tech-adjacent roles? It is rarely for the love of Jira tickets. It is for the leverage. Technology scales. A piece of software written once can serve millions. A manual service scales linearly. To serve more, you must work more. When you align your career with technology, you are aligning with scale. And in a capitalist system, compensation is correlated with scale. We need to be honest about this. Learning the logic of tech is a direct play for economic sovereignty and the ability to disconnect your income from your time. The terrain of systems logic is where the coding myth falls apart completely. We are taught to believe that logic belongs to mathematicians. But if you look at the terrain of motherhood or caregiving or complex project management, it is pure systems logic. You are constantly managing inputs, time, energy, money, constraints, school hours, nap times, deadlines, and outputs, a functioning human, a delivered report. The structural friction is that we view these domestic or soft management skills as intuitive rather than algorithmic. We devalue them. We say, I'm just good at multitasking. No, you are running a parallel processing operating system with high error tolerance. The pivot here is to recognize that the logic you use to manage a household or a department is the exact same logic used to structure a database. It is all about relationships between entities and the rules that govern them. The compass for systems logic points to the whiteboard as the ultimate instrument of power. In 2026, the person who can visualize the system wins. Why? Because complexity is increasing. Our ability to verbally describe problems is failing. We need visual syntax. Research in organizational psychology suggests that visual problem-solving reduces cognitive load and increases team alignment. When you can draw the logic, you own the logic. This is where we debunk the idea that you need an IDE, an integrated development environment, to be technical. Your IDE is a whiteboard marker. The ability to map if this, then that is the core of all software. If you can map the logic of a decision tree on a napkin, you have done 80% of the engineering work. The code is just the translation of that napkin into machine language. The value leverage sits with the napkin sketch. Let's look at a specific landmark, the whiteboarding session. You are in a meeting to improve the customer onboarding flow. The conversation is circular. People are throwing out ideas. We should send more emails, or make the button green. It's chaotic. You stand up. You walk to the whiteboard. You draw a box. User signs up. You draw an arrow to a diamond shape. Is their credit card valid? You draw two paths coming out of the diamond, yes and no. On the no path, you draw the error message. On the yes path, you draw the database update. You turn to the room and ask, where in this flow are we losing them? The room focuses. You have turned abstract anxiety into a concrete map. You have just performed the role of a systems architect. You didn't write code, but you defined the logic that the coders must follow. This visual authority is incredibly high status. It positions you not as a helper, but as a designer of the business reality. The path to mastering systems logic is the logic map audit. This is your homework. I want you to take one workflow you currently own. It could be the monthly reporting process, the hiring pipeline, or even the family morning routine. Map it out visually. Use 3 shapes: ovals for start endpoints, rectangles for actions, and diamonds for decisions. Connect them with arrows. Be rigorous. What happens if the report data is missing? Draw the arrow for that exception. What happens if the candidate rejects the offer? Draw the loop back to the start. By forcing yourself to diagram the if-then-else logic of your daily work, you are training your brain to think like an engineer. You are spotting the inefficiencies. You are seeing the infinite loops. Once you have this map, you can hand it to a developer and say, automate this. That is the ultimate pivot, moving from the person doing the work to the person designing the automation of the work. We must address a piece of terrain that specifically affects women in this pivot: the terrain of perfectionism. In non-technical roles, perfection is often the metric of success. A perfect slide deck, a perfect event, a perfect report. In tech, perfection is a failure mode. If you wait for the code to be perfect, you miss the market. This shift in terrain is jarring. It requires us to trade polish for iteration. The structural friction here is that women are often penalized more heavily for errors than men, so we cling to perfection as a shield. But in the tech ecosystem, the ship it and fix it mentality is dominant. If you try to bring a zero-defect mindset into a minimum viable product environment, you will be viewed as a bottleneck, not a high performer. We have to learn to navigate the discomfort of incomplete work. The compass here points to iterative velocity. This is the methodology of Agile development, but it is also a life philosophy. The data shows that teams who iterate fast learn faster. The cycle time between an idea and feedback is the most critical metric. For us, this means redefining competence. Competence is no longer getting it right the first time. Competence is getting it out, measuring the result, and adjusting. This is a psychological pivot as much as a professional one. It links back to our advocacy pillar. When we let go of perfection, we model a different type of leadership for the women coming up behind us. We show that it is safe to learn in public. We show that the rough draft is a strategic asset, not a sign of laziness. We must recalibrate our internal compass to value progress over polish. The landmark is the beta launch. Imagine you are leading a new initiative. The old you would have spent 3 months perfecting the strategy document, fearing any hole in the logic. The new you, the tech pivot you, writes a 1-page memo outlining the hypothesis and the risks. You share it with leadership in week 1. It has gaps. It is raw. You say, this is the beta version of the strategy. I am looking for early signal on the direction. You have just operated like a piece of software. You pushed a beta. You invited feedback before the concrete dried. This is terrifying, but notice the power dynamic. You are directing the feedback loop. You are not waiting for approval, you are gathering data. By treating your work as a living system rather than a static artifact, you align yourself with the rhythm of the tech sector. You become faster, lighter, and paradoxically, more accurate, because you are course-correcting in real time. The path forward is to practice versioning. In your next project, explicitly label your outputs. Call your first draft V0.1. Call your second draft V0.5. This simple linguistic trick signals to your brain and your stakeholders that this is not the final judgment, it is just the current version. It creates psychological safety. It allows you to release the burden of the double burden, the need to be perfect at work and perfect at home. You can have a V0.1 house. You can have a V0.1 dinner plan. And you can have a V0.1 career pivot strategy. You don't need to know the entire destination to start walking. You just need to know the next node in the logic map. By adopting versioning, you give yourself permission to exist in a state of becoming rather than a state of fixed performance. We have covered a lot of ground. We've looked at the coding myth, translational competence, systems logic, and the trap of perfectionism. The paradox here is that the skills that make you successful in a tech pivot are likely the skills you have been told to minimize. Your ability to see the whole picture? That's systems architecture. Your ability to mediate between conflicting teams? That's translational competence. Your ability to manage chaos? That's iterative logic. The industry tells you that you are lacking hard skills. I am telling you that you are sitting on a goldmine of structural understanding. You simply need to translate your value into their vocabulary. Let's look at the final terrain, the future of work in the age of AI. The terrain is shifting beneath our feet. The entry-level coding roles are disappearing, absorbed by automation, but the human-in-the-loop roles are expanding. The friction here is the fear of obsolescence. We see the headlines and think, if the machine can code, what is left for me? But the machine cannot define the problem. The machine cannot negotiate the ethical trade-off. The machine cannot read the emotional temperature of a client. The terrain of the future values judgment over generation. It values the person who can ask the right question, not just answer it. This is the terrain where the hybrid professional thrives. The tech sector is becoming less about building technology and more about applying technology to human problems. The compass points to prompt engineering as the new literacy. But don't let the term fool you. Prompt engineering is just logic and communication. It is the ability to give clear, structured instructions to an entity, whether a human or an AI, to get a specific result. If you have ever had to delegate a complex task to a junior employee, you have done prompt engineering. You know that if your instructions are vague, the output is garbage. The compass suggests that your ability to articulate intent, to clearly define the what and the how, is the ultimate future-proof skill. We are all becoming managers of synthetic intelligence. Your leadership skills are your tech skills. The landmark for the future is the strategic orchestrator. Picture a leader in 2027. She isn't typing code. She is looking at a dashboard of AI agents, one handling customer support, one optimizing the supply chain, one drafting marketing copy. Her job isn't to do the work. Her job is to monitor the logic. She notices the support agent is too aggressive. She adjusts its parameters. She notices the supply chain agent is missing a vendor constraint. She updates the rule set. She is conducting an orchestra of algorithms. This role requires deep empathy, sharp logic, and a high-level view of the business goals. It is a role perfectly suited for the PathFindHer demographic, women who have spent years managing complex, multifaceted systems with limited resources. The future looks less like a hacker in a hoodie and more like a conductor with a baton. The final path is to start experimenting with this orchestration today. Do not run from the AI tools. Run toward them. But do not use them just to write emails. Use them to build systems. Ask an AI to help you draft a project plan. Ask it to critique your logic. Treat it as a junior partner. By getting comfortable with this collaboration now, you are building the muscle memory for the next decade. You are proving that you are not a relic of the pre-digital age, but a pioneer of the hybrid age. This is the ultimate pivot, from fearing the technology to wielding it as an extension of your own mind. You are the architect. The tech is just the bricklayer. We have mapped the landscape. We have seen that the barrier to entry is not intelligence or ability, but vocabulary and confidence. The tech pivot is not about changing who you are. It is about translating who you are into a language the market values highly. It is about recognizing that your ability to manage trade-offs, to visualize systems, and to iterate under pressure are the very definitions of technical leadership. You do not need permission to claim this identity. You do not need a certificate. You need a whiteboard, a marker, and the audacity to draw the map. Now I want to turn the navigation over to you. Which part of this map feels most like your current reality? Are you stuck at the glass wall of syntax? Are you playing the role of the translator without the title or the pay? Or are you ready to pick up the marker and start architecting? Share your coordinates with us. Let's navigate this terrain together, not as imposters, but as the architects we have always been. Until next time, keep mapping.